Join with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
United States of
America,
and to the republic for which it stands one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome, everybody. It's really nice to see people here. We normally don't have many people here, so we have a couple small things before we get to you guys on the agenda, okay? So is anybody else in the public like to speak on anything else? Now your chance? Everybody good? Okay, great. Correspondence, Mary?
No.
No, we're all going to correspondence. Everybody has the minutes from the August 8th meeting. We had some stuff on there and it's a little bit messy, but I had one thing. There was the trucks. It looks like the way it's written, it was 257,000 for 2 complete setups. That money was just to finish the fit up on it. Okay, so I would make
So how about I make a motion that you just amend whatever you think is in. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from our August 8th, 2023 meeting. Well, second.
okay, so again, I would like to make I'm sorry, Bob. Yeah. Any discussion on this besides that?
Well, before we vote on, you're gonna make your amendment, right?
I'm going to amend John's motion and hopefully you go with that second about changing the dollar, I'm sorry, the dollar amount is correct, but it's the upfit. There was money that we purchased the chassis. This was just to fit the 2 chassis. So that is my motion. Do I have a second for that?
Second your motion.
So any of the discussion on that, everybody's familiar? We bought the chassis early on and this was just to get the plow and the bodies and all that on there. So, all right, any other discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Show unanimous.
I abstained, Nick, because I wasn't there for that meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Dee. Nice to see. I'm sorry. It's not nice to see you, but it's nice to hear you.
That's your name.
All right, Bob, were you at that meeting also?
I was not, but I watched the.
Okay, so you're good on that. Okay, great. Excellent. All right, again, the next thing is consideration, and we're gonna review the park and rec for 23 and 24. I appreciate it. Is everybody here on the commission? Okay, that's great. That's great. We appreciate you guys coming out. This is kind of a fact finding. We met with Brad and Rachel, where we're going, how we got here and where it's going. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a process to get to where we need to be. You guys like to start, jump right in, please.
Sure, I'll start. What's
Thank
first?
you.
I'm Lou Valenti. I'm the chairman of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And to say we were shocked to hear about the numbers doesn't begin to describe the reaction of me and my fellow commission members. A lot of open mouths when we saw these numbers. I think part of it was after years and if not decades of turning, so-called profit, to see things happen like this with, at least from our perspective, no notice, really took us aback. But we immediately got to working with Brad, Rachel, to find out first what happened. And to do that, Rachel, Brad, Greg Henry, and myself, we kind of formed a committee. And we had to first put everything where it needed to be. So on a very granular level, we looked at every program, each and every program, to determine their individual profitability or if they were costing us any money. And that was a massive amount of work undertaken by Rachel and Brad primarily. It involved putting expenses where they were, going through everybody on the payroll and making sure each hour was allocated to the proper bucket, if you will. So we were able to determine that most of this comes down to really 5 issues, which Rachel will get into. So that was the first step. The second step is we started already talking about how we can close the gap in this fiscal year through a combination of cuts and fee raises. And looking at everything, nothing is off the table. And when I say fee raises, it's not for just the problem programs. All the fees are going to have to be raised to help reduce this. To help in that effort, Rachel has been investigating other sort of similar towns, places like Monroe and New Fairfield and Brookfield, to see where their fee structure is and how it aligns with us. Because one thing we don't want to do is price our Bethel kids and even their parents out of participating, but where we can, the difference allows it, we can increase fees on perhaps a step basis, but something to help reduce this delta. And then the third thing is changing procedures going forward. That will provide more transparency, not only for us on the commission, because again, this was a shock to the commission. Brad has already created a new document that is going to be shared with us monthly that will really give us great information and notice earlier in the process if something is amiss. And we'll be seeing that on a monthly basis. Also, accountability. So anything that costs over X thousands of dollars, you guys already now have implemented, you need a PO for $2,500 and above. That's a great idea. Another good idea is that the commission be notified of anything perhaps $5,000 and above. We could have caught a few things. Brad did catch a few things. There were things that were put on the Park and Rec side that have since been put into other places. But again, that would help. We think you guys do your job and us do our job and Rachel do her job to make budget awareness be a high priority. Clearly, it was not. If it was a priority at all, it was not a high priority. But going forward, it will be. Rachel has embraced all this. She's working on her accounting degree. I think she's finished her first year of all the work she's done. So that's a good thing. And then the third component of that, of course, is to avoid something like this ever happening again. And again, there's a lot of reasons why we think this that this happened with certain kinds of procedures and personalities that were involved. But right now, we're just looking to work with you guys to help this, dig us out of this mess and to make the impact on the town be as low as possible. With that, I'm going to turn it all over to Rachel.
So, I'm Rachel. I know most of you. So after looking through everything, after we discovered what had happened, our biggest programs that were the issues were our summer camp program, our before and after care program, our theater program, our in-town basketball program, and kind of road race. We think looking back from 2020 to now, we think it was almost a compounding issue salary-wise, where between 2020 and now, there were 5 minimum wage raises. So we went from, I believe it was $11 to $15 as of June 1st this year. I don't think during the budget process that was appropriately figured out for our staff. Mike Carson, who's the new assistant director who took my position, what we're doing moving forward is we've now really looked at our staffing. And yes, were we over? Now we know we were over. I never felt like we were overstaffed. I was never told we were overstaffed for our summer program. We did have a very high amount of kids that worked for us, but again, they also made camp great. But we also know that less counselors will still make camp great. That obviously does not help with this fiscal budget because camp is in end of June. Most of it's in July and August for next year. But we're already looking to reduce our in-town basketball staff. We are going to look to bid out to certain organizations for where we get our shirts, where we get, our basketballs, where we get our other program things. We've cut buying anything right now for our before and after care program. We used to get them arts and crafts supplies and a ton of other things that weren't expensive. We have a corporate account with an online Fun Express. So that would save us money. But in the big scheme of things, a lot of fun arts and crafts, it was still $900 for like 3 or 4 months of arts and crafts from before and after care. So yes, at some point, I'm gonna have to buy them glue sticks and construction paper and those sort of things, but we've made our staff aware. Work with what you have, work with what we're able to supply you. We will empty out our closet of everything that we have. We know moving forward, theater, obviously, you've seen the byline in there. The expenses were 70,000 for this budget. We have about 8,000 left, and we haven't even started our year yet, school-wide. Summer is a very big part of the theater program because they run multiple things, so it is the largest part of the theater program because they have an older kids theater, they have a 3-week camp for little kids, and then they have 2-week-long camp for the little kids. So it's the most amount of kids that they have. Our fall program has already started. Our registration has started. So my goal after looking at these numbers and knowing what the deficits are is when we come back to you is to be able to really give you solid numbers based on what our expenses will be, what our revenue will be, and having a real number and an actual number that is solid and not an imaginary, I'm going up 2% here or cutting 2% here because of this. Like working with Brad, working with Greg, working with Lou and my staff is really being able to come and say, this is where everything got spent. This is where it is going. At some point, I won't have any money here, and I think myself, my staff, the commission, we'll have to make some hard decisions about some future programming for this year. I don't think it's something that we're gonna rectify this year, because again, my biggest program, which is summer, is already passed. So we kind of missed the boat on that for this fiscal year, unfortunately, but I think moving forward, I'm not adverse to help. I'm not adverse to asking questions. I want transparency with my commission, who I've known most of these people for the 18 years I've been here.
And Rachel's been a breath of fresh air in terms of transparency. It's a completely different relationship that we have.
I think there's a lot of things that, we have to nitpick moving forward. Budgetary wise, like maintenance and supplies, things like that, we spend a lot of money on things that within certain school systems that cost us a lot of money and we get no feedback, whether it's breaking a pump that cost me $5,000 in June that was unexpected. There's no help offered from, Board of Ed to try to pay for it. Paint for all the lines, we just spent $7,000 on athletic field paint. to
That's
cover
another
our
issue.
fall.
But, Rachel, we should make that clear.
You have that favor.
Just
A
for,
month of
I'll get that,
programs,
I'll get that.
maintenance is another
Every 5
issue
minutes.
that we're looking at. And looking at the relationship and the shared expenses of our maintenance budget, because a lot of the things that in the past we paid for, and I don't know why we pay for a lot of these things. We're talking, the schools got 90% plus usage. And it came out of the Parks and Recreation budget, and it often came out of the budget after the budget was made. So these were things that would develop over time, saying, hey, we got to put a maintenance shed down at the field. We need a PA system at the high school football field. And unbeknownst to us, which is why we're talking about that dollar figure, so that we know what's going on, those decisions were made to move those things in the Parks and Recreation budget, and we had no idea.
Point of information. So you're saying that Park and Rec paid for painting the lines on the athletic field
Yeah.
and for speakers? And to put
The
a,
speakers we didn't know, but yes, traditionally, Park and Rec always incurs the cost for all athletic field painting. But like point in fact, like, the turf, which is nice, it has the painted line. The AD in August was like, the football team wants football lines on the practice field on the turf,
And then, additional-
which would be their third field that we have to line. Now, turf paint lasts much longer, so, maybe we'll do it once or twice a season, so it's not a lot, but painting lines, I mean, people might think that it's just like run and paint the line and you're done in seconds. it takes effort and it takes time for it to look good.
I'm just a little bit in shock because I would think that that would have been a conversation with the Board of Ed or someone from that, because that sounds to me like the perfect fit would be to be cooperating and interacting with each other. But
You would.
Here-
think-
here-
one thing,
Yes.
but the other question I have is this itemized in the budget? Cause I don't recall seeing paint lines on
No,
fields.
so
'cause I
here's
was
the-
like, what?
that's my goal moving forward.
Okay, I
It's in
got it.
maintenance
Yeah.
and stuff. It's not broken out for us, right?
Well, yay.
It was a
That's
byline,
excellent.
so under field and maintenance, I believe of the byline in previous budgets would be. Field maintenance, and it would just be parentheses, paint, sod, mulch.
Okay,
So my goal moving forward is to actually itemize what we spend with Board of
Yes.
Ed. What we spend for us, what we spend for youth programs, like where the money is going. You know, we have a $4,000 porta potty bill a month. And I think 4 or 5 of those porta potties are in the school system. Well, we pay it.
Yeah, Cynthia, this is all being now looked at
good.
the program by program level and all the expenses. But one thing that I think might be helpful for all of you to hear is something like, is to use a real example like before and after care. Before and after care was run for years by the Board of Ed. They got rid of it. Park and Rec took it over. So first of all, right, all of our antennae would be up that the Board of Ed wanted to get rid of something like that. Until we saw the numbers. The understanding that we all had was that, and the Board of Ed had, even to this day, was that the before and after care was wildly profitable. Not profitable, wildly profitable. It's not profitable at all. In fact, it lost money. And it's a $200,000 budget item. So when we say we're examining everything and looking for solutions, one possible solution that we're looking into is to take a program like before and after care, which frankly, a lot of us never thought was appropriate for the park and recreation, and give it to a third party. They collect the fees, they run it.
I've had a conversation with Board of Ed already about it,
Yeah.
and we were looking into there are other school systems, I don't know if you've heard of Ed Advance. So they're a state organization that does a lot of STEM programming, they do before and after care at schools. I believe there's some schools in Newtown that utilize them. So I told Board of Ed, I had a meeting with Dr. Carver, and Jen. That we were looking at possibly this year being our last year running it. And as I had said to them was, it's not as profitable as you think, it's really not profitable, it's becoming. Not a burden, but there's just more and more that we have to cover because we're dealing with Board of Ed children. You know, whether it's a child that has a 504 or an IEP that we have to provide certain staff for. If they're needed, you know, certain kids. Might need restraint training. Carson and I, we have child restraint training. So not that every child needs it, but we do have some schools, Rockwell being one. Last year, we had maybe 24 kids in our before care program and we had 5 staff for 24 kids. Because we needed 3 paras, because we had some kids that couldn't be with high school kids and needed staff that had the training to do it. So, yeah.
Didn't we
that's the
have,
point.
we
You
had
went
a
from one
similar
at a higher
arrangement,
rate.
I think we had a similar arrangement with the teen center. It was for outside source and it didn't go well. As I recall, not that this went in, but I think we did do that. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah, and before Park and Rec took over the teen center, what was that?
Oh, Pro Access.
Pro Access, yeah.
Yeah,
That was similar, that was different because it wasn't it was somebody running it. Pro
Okay.
Access was the person running it.
Okay, so
And
this,
Advance
you're
is
thinking
a-
of an organization
a
that
business.
specializes in, this,
correct. This
and
is-
they're covered by insurance and they've got all things. that
Correct,
they
and
do.
actually Ed Advance is actually covered under OEC, which is the Office of
Perfect.
Early Childhood, which we're not. Which does have an advantage, its
Mhm.
advantages, not being under OEC. Because especially with summer camps, you know, you don't have to have a nurse. We have plenty of people that are first aid CPR certified. We have plenty, we started getting medical administration certified. We're gonna have some people insulin certified moving forward, so, you know, those are all little costs that come up.
It's
But
complex to run.
typically, we have 2 paras on full-time for summer camp, because we have kids. Cynthia has a question.
No, I'm trying to wrap my head around, there's a lot of new information here, so. If you did, I'm talking about the after, before and
Yeah.
after, if you did outsource it, they would have all the OEC required personnel and.
We would outsource it,
equipment.
meaning the
Right,
Board of
it's
Ed is
like-
actually doing a survey now with
Okay.
towns. Because they think they might have to bid it out, they can't just
Right.
arbitrarily pick somebody, so Board of Ed's actually doing that legwork with. Knowing that we are not interested in running it moving forward.
Right, but they would charge, the outside source would charge a fee, which would be fixed as a fee.
Correct,
So
which
you
is
wouldn't
actually
have the
comparable to what
expenses.
we charge now.
Okay,
Cause we did look at, when I was first looking at it, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't something like they were gonna charge $25 for AM care a day and. You know, some exorbitant amount in the afternoon, so it's comparable to what we charge. Is what they were charging in their program, so it wouldn't be, and again, in the end, I don't think it would be up to us because Board of Ed, I think, would be contracting out. To
Okay.
take over the liability from us and the town.
And Cynthia,
Better.
just, so if we look at the budget, right, we're attacking this in a lot of different ways. But certainly, we're looking at saving money on the expense side this year. If we're able to do something like that at the end of this year, that would take the revenue with it, but it would take $100,000 out of our budget, the expense side of the budget, just by removing that program. A little more than 100,000 for the remainder of this year, or about $200,000 a year. So when we look at that yawning gap that we have, that is one way to close that yawning gap.
Are you looking at, are you looking at ending it as of December or June?
Well, if, we're looking at both.
Okay,
If we ended it, if we could end it as early as the end of this calendar year, then it would be over $100,000 budgetary savings. But that's why I said we're looking at big, it's a global
Yeah.
perspective. We're looking at big things and a million little things that she can go into. Cutting staff across the board on a lot of little programs where frankly, we were a little fat, if you ask me. Much like my current condition. And there, where, you know, that the I was never, and this is a general comment and it's absolutely true. I think all of us feel it. The budget considerations and following the dollar and running the Parks and Recreation Department as cost effectively as possible. Not running it well, just looking at fiscal responsibility, just cost effectively was not of paramount importance. Going forward, it's going to be a paramount performance. And that's all the work that's being done. It's that there's always going to be an eye to what is this gonna cost? And just to let you know, it's not like the commission didn't talk about these issues. We were, like I told you, before and after care, it's wildly profitable. We didn't know, we didn't see the numbers, or Greg Henry was a particular stickler on this, but all of us at one point or another had made this comment many times each year. How are we accounting for all of these increases in the minimum wage? Because we're multiplying, you know, $1 or $2 by thousands of hours. It doesn't seem that it's possible. So one of the refrains was, well, everything is going to work out, you know, and it's going to be reconciled at the end of the year. When we did get troubling news, sometimes we would heard that about the end of the year, they're going to take money from here, bring money from there, and it's all going to come out in the wash, which is something that all of my fellow commission members will attest to many times. Brad has made it clear that never happened. But I don't think necessarily that was with Brad, those kinds of conversations. I think it was different. But anyway, that's where we are. And you guys, for any questions you have, but Rachel is looking at every single expense.
Lou, I tried to get your attention when you were on that topic, but let's say a line item for before and after is $200,000. What is the revenue that's generated now that you know it's a loser? So you get rid of that line item, but what's the revenue that it's gonna be pulled out of the?
It'll be
revenue?
below 200,000.
No, well, okay,
But I think
180
what
or
we're
is it
talking
100?
about, we have a number.
That would be helpful information, 'cause the
Yeah.
numbers that we have are accurate. It's
Yeah.
not-
Yeah.
Oh, no, we broke
Yeah.
it down.
Well, it's bad, model, like,
Yeah,
it'll populate
Yeah.
that for you.
We do
So
have
you
that.
can
number.
get that number for you.
yeah, I don't have it on me, but yes, I can definitely get that.
So for the point of discussion, is it 125,000? Is it 180 where us as a town say, hey, it's worth a $20,000 deficit to be able to support our needy families in town? That's where my question comes from.
That's a great point, and that is another
There's
discussion.
equality there.
Yeah,
Right, well, that's another discussion we have to have,
Yeah.
because we identify some things as programs, right? Where there's an expectation of a certain revenue return, like in-town basketball should be able to pay for itself. Road race should be able to pay for itself, things like that,
It's
you know,
programs
that's,
and services, and
Right.
services would be
Yeah.
more like,
but services could be
Could be
before and
that.
after care.
yes.
And services, even within programs, there's a service component. Rachel alluded to needing paraprofessionals. They're needed both in before and after care and in the camps, and it's a 1-to-1. So the parents pay the same amount, but you're paying a paraprofessional far more than minimum wage for 1-to-1 with that student. So I think
Mhm.
at one point we came up with
I think it was 30,000 this year so far.
$30,000 and you're getting back like 10,000. And so that's costing us $20,000 to provide what I feel is a service so that these kids in Bethel can, where they're not a danger to others, you know, can participate, but it's a big hit. And as they'll tell you with the Board of Education, more and more kids are now being characterized as needing these kinds of, you know, 1-to-1 services. So it's going to just get worse, but it's a great question. And I know we have that number.
And I agree that it's a service. But my personal feeling, when we were asked to take it over 7 years ago, I said no. I said, I don't think we should take it over, because they were getting rid of it for a reason. Now, Board of Ed has a huge amount of staff overall. My office is 4 people, really 3 people. The one person that does the work on this is part-time. It is a lot of work for a large amount of kids. We've got overall, I think it's about 200 kids between both programs. It's a lot of kids to handle for an entire school year.
It's a program that's swallowed in the department.
It's,
But you're
amount
in a
of time.
conversation now with the Board of Ed. to
Correct.
take- Okay, so,
no, personally,
Yeah.
for me and my department, I would rather give it back to Board of Ed and have them figure it out. Figure out how to go
Right.
back to providing the service that they were providing for years. And then snuck it in to our department.
well,
To answer
that's
John's
the-
question though, John, specifically. There is a way to do it, to make sure that the kids in Bethel who can't afford like a program that may not be as charitable as us. They could still be subsidized.
Yeah, that's
Right, okay, so when you started this presentation, you talked about crayons and glue sticks and
Yeah.
at $900 for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I think as a town of Bethel that spends $90 million on our community, we should be able to buy you as many glue sticks as we want, right? So
Yes.
that being said, you know, we still need to know the losers, the big losers and the little losers, right? So I think as a committee, you should say, oh, these are little losers, but the value is just huge for that single mom that lives at Plum Tree's condo that needs to be able to support that family. You know, I can't imagine being a single mother and not knowing where to bring my child before school or after. So I think that's important. I don't want you to think, well, I guess I'm speaking for myself.
And here's
That
the
is
thing,
as
I would never wanna get rid of it just because.
Right, but
Like,
that's why I wanna make
wouldn't-
sure we're not.
No, I feel like. Forget about before and after, I don't care about, like, listen, we're Park and Rec, we care about kids.
Right,
But in the same respect, if we have an opportunity to release it back to Board of Ed, I think it's a good opportunity to take.
okay, good.
They're better, they're in a better position to do this.
They're better
than we are.
equipped.
Like he said, just staffing alone, John, it's.
Well, as long as the program survives, if there's a need for it, right? So that's the big thing, okay?
Yeah.
So 2 more things during your presentation that came up to me. So, and Brad, this might go to you. It seems like for the time that I've been here, sometimes Park and Rec pays for something, sometimes highway maintenance pays for a dump truck body. There's gotta be clear columns that says, your budget is this. You need to have capital projects that you're looking in the future and you are gonna pay for it, not maybe pay for it.
Well, that's what. Some of the discussion we've had, I'll use an example, because it's easier to use an example. Tree work. So last year's budget for them, and probably this year's budget too, the director budgeted $10,000 for tree work. In the parks, last year in 2023, there's $40,000 worth of tree work. And the tree work that they get, it's not Eileen or Rachel or whoever walking around going, this tree needs to come down. Somebody reports a tree, the tree warden looks at it and says, this tree needs to come down. The second the tree warden says it needs to come down, we have a huge liability. We had a liability before the tree warden says it needs to come down, but the second they do, now you're aware of a liability and that tree needs to come down. And we have this discussion all the time of, should those trees come out of Park and Rec because it's in a park? Whereas if it was along a road, then it's the tree warden account. So some of that stuff we're trying to finalize, like I know when Rachel talked about, she met with Dr. Carver and Jen Varielli a week or two ago to talk about some of this stuff. We need to establish some of those lines, and honestly, it's a conversation that we're having, and Dan and I are having in our monthly budget review meetings. And really, between Dan and I and the department heads, we gotta start setting some of those boundaries, because it's been all over the place, like Park and Rec pays an outside source to do the police station, mow the grass and do the mulch and all that stuff. Because the police weren't happy that Park and Rec could only get to it every 10 days and they wanted to cut every 7 days and they wanted it mulched and they wanted this and that, but that's a cost that's in their budget. You know, like, and that's kind of stuff that we have to really look at is like, if you want something above and beyond. Maybe that belongs to the police department to put in their budget so that this board can go. Why is this line in here and go? I understand you want it to be pretty, but. You know, why did you get pretty whereas this place doesn't get as pretty?
We've been having these conversations for years and it just was going around in a circle. So, I mean, I remember we were trying to determine the difference between what is a branch and what is a tree.
Yeah.
You know, like we were defining all
I'll
the
pay for the mulch. and
Yes,
pay for
like,
the grass
and,
cutting.
you know,
Yeah.
what size can you not cut down with a hedge clipper or whatever?
I think
It's
that
crazy.
one of the big benefits of what Dan and I are doing now is. Quarterly, we're gonna meet with the department heads
I know.
more frequently if we need to look at us all this stuff
Yeah,
and get some of this stuff out. At
yeah,
our staff meeting today, Dan said, start looking at your accounts.
it's a whole new world.
What do you have in there that it doesn't really necessarily belong to you? And what are you missing that because you've run bare bones forever? Is another discussion too that we're having, to truly, really try to get the department head to own their budget.
Right,
And they
because-
have,
Oh, sorry.
some of them have been really good about owning their budget. And other ones have seen the budget as a guideline. And the budget shouldn't really be viewed as a guideline. It should be,
Right,
that's what you ask the boards, because it goes to both boards and the public board. It's a hard line, unless you come back and say, we need more because X.
pursuant to it, I just wanted to say that it just struck me that it's, okay, we provide services, the town provides services for the people, the taxpayers, the residents. It's kind of strange for a department to be trying to get services from another department, you know, it's like.
So it doesn't
yeah,
get on their.
yeah, it's
number,
like, well,
right?
I want that mulch, you know, well, so I'm gonna get that from Park and Rec rather than having it in their own budget. It
If
seems
I may, Cynthia, with
insane.
the tree example, for example, the 2 trees that were removed in front of the library. That was charged to the Parks and Recreation budget.
And
To me, it doesn't make sense. But maintenance is one of the big categories that we're looking into. Again, fairness, distributing it to where it more appropriately should be.
Mr. Chairman, comment. You know, one thing that I've noticed here in the 6 months or so is that Parks and Rec has also become a little bit of a catch-all place. Because, you know, it spans so many services, you know, in the town with respect to taking care of lawns and taking care of buildings and taking care of schools and all that. That is kind of a catch-all. Even the cemeteries are in the Park and Rec budget, which really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so we're just gonna have to also be very mindful that when something comes up, we just don't indiscriminately, you know, put it out into the budget. You know, so we're gonna have to get a better handle, when we come to the board next year. And even sooner, right, just with all these
Can
things,
work on it.
where we're making sure we're getting the funding, pulled out of these other budgets, so we all see it and it's transparent.
And I think one of the things Rachel and I have talked a lot about is tracking expenses throughout the year. And that's like, we sent you July, Rachel sent it to you, but we worked on it together, the July and August sheets. This is what we've done so far because salaries and programs were a big deal. So in the next steps over the coming months are gonna be adding the maintenance in there and adding more of that detail in there. For Rachel to have it, for Dan and I to have it, and for the commission to have it so they can see it.
John, did you have another thought?
I do, and I promise my last question, Mr. Chairman. So salaries,
He's lying.
I probably am, but, and I'm really, I'm excited about this as a process that we're gonna work through this and it's gonna be a plan put together. But last year's budget, your salaries were $856,000. This current year was $936,000. I remember the presentation back in February and that number was all about 5 minimum wage salary increases. And that's how we justified that number growing by $80,000. Was that not the case?
It was,
I don't think it's enough, yeah.
to be honest, it absolutely was not a realistic budget as we learned. We looked at, we saw the actuals of the end of 2022, and we can tell you that that budget was not a realistic number, the salary line item, and we essentially started this year in the hole of over $150,000. That was not a realistic budget. We were told it was a realistic budget.
So I think what happened with some of that, John, is when the last budget was made by the prior director, she took what she budgeted for camp the prior year and increased it somewhat for the minimum wage. The problem is her number for the budget for the prior year was $100,000 low. So now you still have that $100,000 problem, plus it's multiplied by
You
the
never
minimum
caught it.
wage. And I think because the minimum wage took off and the staff, like, not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but Rachel told me a number of times that she would say camp needs 6 more people. And the answer was yes. Because I think it was ran as, here's what we need to do to run camp successfully without a mind of the budget. And that to me was alarming because it should be, I understand you need 6 more, I can afford 3, or we can't afford any. Or, and that wasn't the approach that was taken.
And we can run camp and a very successful camp with less staff. We can run basketball and run successful programs with less staff. They'll just work harder, which is fine. They're getting paid, so they can work harder. And like I said, there's no issues with that whatsoever, cutting staff. We're confident that that will work and we'll make that work within the constraints that we have.
I remember the presentation, it was over, and all of the room feeling really good about what the Park and Rec does for our community, right? But the problem is, we have to be transparent, and we cannot tell the voters that we need 1.6 million to give this program to the community, and then need another 300,000. That's, I think, my rub. That's where.
We share your concern.
Yeah.
A
I think-
100%.
Like one of the things, so Nick and I met and we talked to Rachel yesterday, even though we've talked a lot about it over the last couple months, but literally yesterday we went through it. And Nick brought up the point of, well, what happened in 22? 22 Park and Rec as a whole was over, I'll round up and say 84,000. Which isn't great, but it's not 300,000.
Right, 350.
So
Or
the next-
350.
Yeah, I think it's 366 now. So one of the things that Rachel and I are now gonna do is we're going back to 22 also, which sounds dumb to go back. But the next thing we have to see is what happened in 22 compared to 23, because now we're trying to build out our trend lines, right? So if we're trying to trend out the rest of this year, we need more data points to know, to accurately look at what the rest of the year is gonna cost us. what happened was there's stuff that was paid for in 23 that should have been 22, and 22 should have been 150. And that would have been more telling us a year ago that this was a bigger problem, with some of that stuff buried because bills came in late and, you know. So, but I think it's a lot of work to go through 2,000 lines of salary, which is what Park and Rec for years, I think it's 2,700 lines. But that's, Rachel and I did it for 2023. We're gonna do it for 2022, and we're gonna do 2024 and the out years every month. Because it's more digestible, and then she can track it better. What does camp actually cost us? We care about what was budgeted, but the actual is really, really important.
We suspect that's the biggest number. The
Yeah.
biggest problem
Yeah.
by far, was camp.
And, you know, trust me, this committee can speak for itself. I'm sorry, I meant everybody here. But it's not our intent to oversee, we know nothing about programs, you know, and that's what you all people is for. So we're not trying to micromanage. We have to understand how we got there, and data is good. But we're not trying to figure out how many people need to be in basketball camp.
Yeah.
We just need to be comfortable, because, you know, if there's another ask, we need to be comfortable that we went through all this and this is how we got here, you know what I mean? So, but I think the information is good. Bob, I know you have something to add.
Always, right? Look,
Yeah,
yeah, you can start down that.
No, I'm good.
no, please, Bob, we'll start with you.
I think you had the right approach to today, right? We looked at last year for purposes of informing what we were going to do kind of next year. And that makes me feel better about where we are. To John's point, I see this as what we presented to the townspeople question. I would wager, and I don't bet all that much, but I would wager that if we went to the town to say, hey, Park and Rec is going to be whatever the number was we told them, plus 366, they probably would have said, yeah, okay. But I think the rub is that we did not do that. And so we don't want a repeat. And at least based on the numbers that I see and the information that was provided for us, we are kind of unfortunately heading down that same path, right? If the budget kind of continues as it was presented, it looks like, you know, we were 366 short on expenses last year or over. And under best case scenario, we're going to be about 250 this year. So I think this is the right time to get into it. And it does seem, to your point, it's programs, when I just looked at these numbers, right? It's programs and maintenance. Those seem to come up to about, you know, under the 80-20 rule, like 81% of the 366. So I take it that's where you're going to focus going forward. That makes tremendous sense to me. I guess I would help my understanding if I knew what are the next steps. Do you all kind of go back, do this additional analysis, come back to this board next month meeting, with the new sheriff in town, do you kind of then start brokering deals with people? And maybe this should wait till everybody else is coming.
No, good.
But I'd be really curious as to, what are the constructive next steps? How can we continue to monitor how we get out of this hole so that we all can face people who come to vote for the budget and say, yeah, we're pretty confident this number's right.
Well, I think the next steps is really, like, between Brad and myself, is really breaking down every expense from last year, this year, putting them in the correct categories, so I know where we're spending a lot of money. Maintenance, obviously, we're spending a lot of money. We're looking at, we did raise fees for summer camp, which obviously weren't enough. We started raising fees this fall. We're looking, which we'll talk about at the next commission meeting, raising fees for winter programming, changing what the non-resident rates are. We're gonna change how we allocate field time, rental time. I've had conversations with Dan about how, like, not usually the board of finance meeting, but when other people have meetings here, because the building's open, we're here. We're staffing it. That's not something that we budget for. Food Truck Fridays are amazing. They are amazing. The concerts that he restarted were amazing, but we staff them. And Food Truck Fridays, concerts, it's typically 2 staff because the building's physically open and we need somebody doing the garbages. You can't just have one person leaving, doing all the garbages, because unfortunately, if you know the building well enough, if one door is left open, you can get into the entire building. Granted, most people lock their offices, but, you know, so there's little things where I'm looking at the staffing, I'm looking at what we're putting out. Like I had this conversation with Greg, is now we're in fall, you know, it's a non-traditional season for softball and baseball, right? I have 8 fields on half the line on Saturday for softball and baseball, you know, and that's overtime. You know, so I think we're gonna really look down to the nitty gritty moving forward about, are we doing too much? You know, like I said, with the turf lines, we had to line a 3rd football field. That's time. That's 2 or 3 hours out of my 4 maintenance guys' time. One guy with 3 other guys working. And I mean, if you all have lawns, you know, the lawns haven't stopped growing. So instead of having some downtime to do all the other fields and things like that, they're doing double duty.
So Rachel, let's say for the next month,
Yep.
you and Brad go through all of this stuff, then have a discussion with
Correct.
your commission, and then they come back to you.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna also look, we're now starting fall programs, so I'll be able, we're starting our fall programming.
Got it.
So now I can really look at, because typically whatever we run in the fall, we run throughout the school year. And those numbers tend to stay the same, you know, plus or minus maybe 5 kids. So I can really have a good idea of, if this is what we ran for preschool in the fall for the first 6 weeks, this is most likely what we will run, if we can run, moving forward till the end of the school year. Basketball, I won't know because we don't start that till October. But if I could probably go based off of last year's numbers, because they'll probably be comparable to what we'll sign up for this year. So I could also figure out what that's gonna cost us, minus the lesser staff. You know, but it's little things that cost, like even basketball, years ago, pre-Sandy Hook. If I had 4 gyms open for basketball practices during the week, I only had to work. I would come pick up, you know, 8 bags of balls, bring them to the gyms, hang out in a gym, go pick up all the bags of balls. Now, the schools require me to have a staff person in every gym that we're in. So I'm paying a high school kid $15 an hour in 3 to 4 gyms, 4 days a week. To just hang out. And granted, sometimes they help coach, sometimes they do coach. You know, they do a good job, but you know, those are expenses that I don't think were taken into account in previous years, so. Really have to figure that out. Do we not have it? Because, you know, looking at it, if we cut that, we'd save about $6,000.
Cutting practices.
Cutting practices out.
That's
But-
granular stuff.
Don't look
So-
at Greg, he would be mad if you cut practices out. But, you know, I mean, we did it once when the high school gym was under construction, we didn't have practices. So it's doable. It's just, you know, it's something you'd hate to take away from the kids, but again, if that's something we have to do and it's something the commission decides like. That's a smart choice to start getting the ball rolling in the right direction, then, you know, that's a choice we make.
So subject to the chair thinking it's the right thing to do you all think you come back to us in November? It's 2
I think that
months.
would be more realistic.
November's probably more realistic because the season's changing, right? Because school just started. So this Friday is Rachel's first before and after payroll run. So she knows what the money's coming in. You could do, but you gotta start tracking it. So, but yeah, the next step really is to recreate what the 24 budget should have been. With cuts that they're making, look at that number and go, that's still way too high, go back, make more cuts if we need to, and then. Look at what that variance really is, budget to the expected actual. And then make a decision of, is it a request back to this board, is it? Do we have to wait to see what happens with before and after, because if before and after goes. Board of Ed takes it back over, whatever, a revenue will drop, but the expense might drop 100 grand. If after the winter break, Park and Rec's not doing, you know, like, but that's the stuff that we have to look at. Unfortunately, we've had the most expensive part of the year already. You know, and
Very
because,
front loaded.
yeah, and the fall programs were all set months ago. We really only have winter and spring and a little
try
bit
to
of
make
next
up any-
summer to try to
Yeah.
adjust.
To Nick's point. In November, you will have 7 months. Roughly, to try to figure out where this board goes with the overall budget, but then you all, I assume. Changes made this month, just hypothetically, right? Changes made this month will have a greater impact than changes made in December.
Mhm.
So to the extent that you all can kind of do your thing in the meantime, that I assume that's gonna help you.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
again, subject to him thinking it's okay,
Okay, of course.
maybe you come back in November.
I think that's realistic.
We'd have a better idea.
And with-
October's too early.
listen, At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you know, when the department head comes back, Park and Rec Commission come back for the board. It's gotta be, we've made the cuts we've made, because the only other thing that the board can do is add money. I'm trying not to.
You gotta show us, right?
We're
You
trying
can't-
not to do that.
Yeah.
So I think we need time to make sure we're on top of these things. And also, we will be doing some planning for next year, right? You know, with Food Truck Fridays, things like that, we can look for better sponsorship opportunities. For instance, this year, we had new $2,000 from town savings, right? We could have used more of that towards staff. But what we did is we used it for families who couldn't afford to be there, to give them an opportunity to come. But we still had money some left over, so that kind of thing we can look at. There's still opportunities like she mentioned that, you know, maybe we do, give the before and after program back to somebody. And there are other programs that maybe we could outsource like that too.
I really like our conversation, like we're treating it like a small private business, which is great, you know what I mean? But government is not.
Yeah.
About making money, you know what I mean? And there's a value of the money we spend, but I just wanted to say, Dee, I know you have your hand up very patiently. You wanna unmute yourself?
Oh, hi, I didn't actually have my hand up, but I do want to ask one question. And Brad, I think this is for you. So when you guys talk about $366,000 as an overage on expenses, correct?
Yeah.
And is there revenue that I understand we don't offset it on the books, but it actually is going into the general fund to offset some of that? Or is 366 the actual, like?
So the updated June report that we'll talk about in the comptroller report shows 371,593. Because we had a maintenance bill come in. That was half old year, half new year, so that brought it up to 371,593. The revenue side for last year, they collected $227,540 more than we budgeted. So correct, like if we were running a household and not a government organization, you'd look at the net. But because of the way we have to do the revenue and expenses, you have to look at them separately and then kind of back of your mind go, all right, we understand the 371 did bring in 227 more. And I feel like we talk a lot about Park and Rec services versus revenue generating. As much as we understand a good chunk, some of what they do, I don't know if it's a good chunk of what they do is service based. I think we'd all still be upset it happened go, but if they brought in 380 more than we budgeted go, you understand it more.
Right. So Brad, what you're saying is if we were that small business, right, that Nick was just mentioning, I know we're not, but if we were, we'd be $150,000 really over budget instead of 370, whatever, right?
Yes. But the 370 is the real number because of the way we have to budget and stick within a budget.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I do understand that even, if we were to account the other way, 150,000 over is a lot. But what I would like to say is that I do believe that Parks and Rec provides some really critical services to, not just our kids, but our families, our adults. I mean, I do. So I understand the budget doesn't cover what it needed to cover, but I would hate to see like significant slashing of really great services to our town. And I believe probably that most of the taxpayers would not want to see that as well. They'd rather pay $10 more a year than, have, I don't know, whatever it is, a theater program, slashed or some other program that really is providing important things to our kids and our families and our adults go away. So that's just my 2 cents. But thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Dee. And we're gonna go around the horn here, but I don't wanna price the kids out, or the parents out. I mean, there's a great service that the Park and Rec does. As I get older, I get more compassion. A couple of years ago, I take the cookies away, right? So, right, you need them. So you're good point. But there is a huge value. And again, like Dee said, but the taxpayer has to have that decision, you know what I mean? And that's just what it's about, you know what I mean? So, and again, we haven't talked about theater much. And that is important because that's a huge over right now. And I know you're gonna work on how we're gonna fix this and, so the big thing is to me, I don't wanna price the kids out. You know what I mean? Every kid doesn't play baseball, but look at the money we spend on the fields, you know what I mean? So theater is important or another program, so.
And in regards to theater, we are considering, and we'll bring it up at the commission meeting, either moving it into a self-sustaining account or, and the theater people have had conversations about possibly. When they started with us in 2017, they were their own business and lost their space. And we're trying to come in here, can't remember what the business is called. That's the look I feel like Bob's giving me.
It was
I
Aaron,
was
Aaron,
vague recollection.
yeah,
And,
Aaron,
no,
right?
it was Aaron, but she had a business and they had a spot, Bar Garden.
Right,
And when they came in, they were looking to rent and run stuff. But instead, we absorbed them into the theater program. So Aaron and Anthony, who have done amazing, the program has just grown significantly since we started it. They are also looking at the other option of going back into becoming an LLC and, quote unquote renting for us. I mean, we would still work with them because they are a great program, but that would take out the revenue and the expense from our accounts.
But it also takes away some of the risk
Yes.
that if that
Something goes
program
wrong.
suddenly is losing money. Then the LLC is dealing with that and not us. But it also then loses the control of what we charge for it.
Mr. Chairman, one quick comment.
Yes, Dan.
I think one thing that we also have to be mindful of is I've had a sense that each time the budget comes around, that we look at Park and Rec and they look at their program and then they kind of just add on to what they think it's going to be based on what the program was. We need to make sure we account for growth. Because all of these programs have grown significantly. Remember, Bethel's up to 20,600 people now. So that, I think these programs have grown each year as well. And I don't know that we've adequately prepared for the growth. Because remember, the budget comes out, we don't always know how many people are gonna sign up. So we may have to make some hard decisions there, maybe account for some growth, but also be able to say, maybe we have to, cut the line, when people are coming into it, we can't give it to everybody perhaps, but yeah, just keep that in mind.
Like our summer camp sold out within the first week we started registration in the past year. And typically it's never sold out at all. 2 summers ago, it did sell out, but it was more towards, end of June, early July, and we sold out the weeks. I mean, there were camps and the teen camp was booked. Like we went from 35 in teen camp to 45 this year. So, that was another expense where we weren't planning on doing that. We didn't technically budget for that, but we said, you know what, we can service 45 7th through 9th graders. Why wouldn't we do that? And we just really honestly based it on how many kids we could fit on a bus with staff, which is 55. So we said we can take 45, we can have the 10 staff, and we're good. But little things like that, it is growing. Our before and after care, we booked it out before August 1st. That's on a waiting list.
There's a great demand.
Cynthia, you wanna add something?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, so my brain is breaking this down. I think it seems like we're kind of collapsing the categories or what, it's almost like a 3-pronged thing. I'm all about the money, love the services. I don't think anybody on this board wants you not to provide services and programs. But, and you know what, thank you for doing this because this is the most information I've gotten about Park and Rec in the past 8 years. That's not throwing anyone under the bus, but there's part of this that is like almost like an audit that you're doing to try to learn about the future. And then there's, you know, assessing what programs are like the little losers and the bigger losers and the real winners. And also, it just seems to me that there should be a push towards having the Board of Ed take over this, or having the police station put it in their budget. It's almost like, I don't know how that happens, if you negotiate and then it happens, I don't know. But it just seems like there's a lot of overlap that just should not be there. And I also am a big fan of fundraising. So my question to you is, do you ever have fundraisers? And for me, when I think of theater, I think of sponsors, I think of patrons. I love theater. I majored in musical theater at the Boston Conservatory, believe it or not. I love theater.
You
I-
were some character.
yeah, I am a character, I'm my own character. I've made up my own character. And it's just, there's so many private companies and people who have money, and that I think would be, maybe they don't even know about it, you know, and I think there needs to be some kind of outreach, and I'm not just trying to give you fundraising advice or something. There has to be some kind of outreach, because what happens to the Board of Finance? We have many discussions about Park and Rec, and we appreciate Park and Rec, but you know, we get maligned because like we're not giving enough money. But literally, we didn't know anything about Park and Rec. We don't know, the information you're telling us now is brand new information, and it's elucidating.
Theater can be a profitable program. And I think that it is a profitable program. I think in the past, there were things they weren't told to account for and to budget. I think Aaron and Anthony, now Anthony, you know, works at WestCon, like, these are people that do this professionally.
I understand.
But like, their budgets, this budget for this fall is a very realistic, what they budgeted for is very realistic. I don't think they were ever asked to say, if you run X amount of shows for a year, what are your expenses gonna be?
Granted, and that was the problem across the board,
Yeah.
you know, it just wasn't permutated out, but I think mine is more of a philosophical, I hate to say ideological, but just in terms of, you know, there are discrete programs that would, what's the harm in having private people, like Food Truck Friday, Newtown Savings Bank? It just seems to be a match where, to bring in people who could do that, and people who want to sponsor something, or to.
I'm working on a sponsorship package, which we've never had.
Okay, and now you're talking my language, no.
Races.
I hear you,
included.
Mark.
You know, I'm looking at fundraising, like sponsorship packages for, whether it's our movie nights that
Right,
we've had on the lawn, which in the big scheme of cost aren't a lot, but it is, it's still money out of pocket. You know, I was telling Dan, he wasn't here we used to do the Halloween on Thursday nights, let the kids come from 3:30 to 5:30. And it was great, we get so many kids in Halloween costumes, it was super cool. But our department bought all of the candy, our department supplied the pizza to every office. I already told them, I go, I can't do that this year.
no, and I
You know, like,
understand
little
that,
things like that, but yes, if we had monies from fundraising, it would be something.
but that takes some outreach
Yeah.
and some, you know.
So can I just add one thing?
Yeah, and I
Thank-
am not quite done.
Sorry, I know one of the things we did this year through the first selectman's office is they put out a call for sponsor a kid, right? And gave the towns like PayPal account and stuff like that. So I think, because it came up earlier today at our staff meeting, your outreach is what, 2,600 people in your newsletter?
That's just newsletter in
Um,
the female portion.
so there are new opportunities under the current CEO of the town that we can do some of this outreach stuff and go. Even like, not just the people that follow Park and Rec on Facebook, but like, and could put in his newsletter, if you're a business and want to sponsor X, Y, and Z, please reach out to so-and-so, you know, and I think that
Exactly.
stuff goes a long way, because
Yes, it
to a
does,
business, there is value there too. Because we do
exactly,
have a built-in audience.
that's the
So
beauty
it's
of
not
it,
just necessarily the charity piece looking for money from town people that already pay for this stuff through their taxes. But it's also opportunity for smaller businesses to advertise.
it's
their-
not charity at all, that's
Yeah.
the thing, I think that sometimes, you get the impression that, that it's perceived as charity, and yet it's not, it's a partnership. And just from where I stand, and I'm, as a conservative, I just think that, it's especially as it's the way it's going, is the middle class is getting really stretched. And, you know, I say rich people give more, you know, like they should. And I'm not even like saying it should be equally distributed. But what the heck, I contribute to the social services department, just give them money, because why not? If I have the money, why don't I do that? I just can't believe that you don't have more of that, because that would take the pressure off the people, the people of this town who are in the middle. It's just getting pecked to death by ducks, the taxes that keep going up and up. People say it's $10 a year or $20 a year. It adds up. I know my house taxes went up like 700, almost $1,000 in the revale. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm sort of imploring you.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what's so wonderful about what you're doing is that you've taken it, you know, taken the bull by the horns. You're very clear thinking about it. You know, you're trying to put everything in its right place. And I'm very grateful for that. But I just implore you to try to, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Can I respond for 1 second?
Yes, please.
So that's absolutely something Rachel's doing across the board. One of the big drivers of another thing, the road racing is very expensive. So we're doing that. We're looking for sponsors there, but we're also looking, instead of staffing it with 40 people, get volunteers. Volunteers would love to be involved in a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So
I want to hit on that, because I know you had a conversation with Troy, because we talked about it. The schools have a new program which actually helps track the student service hours, and Park and Rec and the town will be vendors. And we're gonna be able to go in there and basically post like a race or something we want and get those kids to sign up for service hours.
I just have
So,
one more
yeah.
thing. So, and then as far as,
Brenda.
we've talked about this before, but with people, departments sharing like sources for, like you're saying you're buying basketballs. I mean, the school has a whole athletic department. Do you ever,
It's for our in-town program. Like basketball, we would buy basketballs.
you would buy the
We would
basketballs,
buy
but
them.
why
It's
would,
our program.
I know it's your program, but why wouldn't you, do you have the same source? Are you buying from, like, we used to buy paint from Tom's Paint, you know, it's like, I'm just saying.
We probably don't have the same source because they
Right.
tend to go through bigger companies, where
Right.
we try to, we outsource, when we get the basketballs, I will look for the cheapest quality, but cheaper.
I understand, but doesn't it make sense to piggyback on someone's discount and volume?
Fine.
And then have allocated 6 basketballs?
look into it.
I
I
mean,
mean, I could
I'm all
transport
about
them
that.
who they order from and try to do
Right, but
that.
I'm saying there are
Yeah.
supplies, there's arts department there, you know what I'm saying, there should be much more cooperation and interaction with the Board of Ed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because like, look, I'm getting now, like buying oil for like, I don't know, a penny a gallon, yeah, that's realistic. And then I'm gonna just, okay, well, you can have like 10 gallon,
Yeah.
why not?
Can you tell me where you're buying oil at?
Well,
Because-
Well, Saudi Arabia, and let me tell you.
Starting you off, Brown.
I'm going on. Can't even really describe it.
Bobby Joe, you have something else?
Guys, so thank you for, getting on top of this and, being willing to work and communicate, and I know this was not an easy, undertaking. So,
Honestly, it'll just make me better.
Mhm.
Moving forward, so as,
think how easy your budget will be for 24.
right, and like I said, it's not a situation you ideally would want to be in, but anybody that was in this position, when I took it over, would be in the same position, so. You know, you either grab the bull by the horns or.
You know, desk and
Yeah,
thank you.
Oh, well.
Will, is there anything you want to add?
Pretty much most of the asked and answered, I did write down in the very beginning, what you think happened, put us into the situation. And the only thing I've heard concrete come back, and there's gotta be more of this, was the 5 minimum wage increases.
It was a combination of that, it was a combination of being overstaffed and not realizing we were overstaffed. Like I said, I mean, honestly, in all my years here, I was really never told no. So if I asked for X amount of staff,
Mhm.
which in my eyes, I felt was a reasonable amount of staff, which made camp super fun or in-town basketball super fun. I was never told no, which again, was great for me.
How are you taking no now? Are you okay?
When we ended camp this year, you know, usually our typical thing was if you worked for us, you had a job next year. And we sent out letters with their last paychecks, like, listen. We need to know 3 months earlier than we typically did, and jobs aren't guaranteed. So, you know, we put that out there to the staff, like, you may not have a camp job, so the effort that you made this past summer is really gonna dictate if we are cutting staff, and we are. Who we wanna come back, so that we get the higher quality, and listen, all of our counselors are great, but you know, some people stand out and others don't. So, you know. I think that. Obviously, you won't see summer affect this budget, but hopefully the new budget, my first budget, you know, that will be reflected and that will be, as you said, will be within those lines throughout the whole process.
No, it will be, yeah.
I don't even necessarily look at this as, you know, I mean, you just look at, you know, like new sheriff, there's a new sheriff and just like whatever happened, imagine just having one source or one person that you're asking and they say, okay, no problem, and you're not seeing the paperwork. I mean, that just, I understand it. I think it's a lot more than just the minimum wage.
This was my first budget. As a Board of Finance, not my first budget, but as a member of Board of Finance. And I'm coming in here. February-ish,
Ish.
and pretty sure you were almost exhausted as far as, not exhausted physically, but the money was in March or
I think that's what they figured
Yeah.
out.
the budget was pretty
Figured it
much.
out.
And we didn't catch it either, so,
I think once it was caught, it was March.
yeah. With that being said, you know. These type of crises, again, happen all the time. We're just gonna get past it. You guys do provide a much needed service in town. Much like every park and rec in every town. You know. We want a certain quality of life in town, and you guys are providing, helping to provide that, and you know, this has been an educational process for me. Listening to, like this before and after program that you guys were talking about. I sure wasn't aware that, and that's how naive I was, that the park and rec was paying for this one. So, how long, when did that begin?
We're in our 7th year where we took it over. I'm not sure how long Board of Ed ran it for, but I think it was quite some time, but I'm not aware because honestly didn't know they ran it until they came to us to see if we wanted it.
I was on the board of that, I thought. The board of Ed's covered everything back then.
Yeah, and I don't know why, I wasn't part of the conversation about why they wanted to get rid of it. I wasn't part of the conversation really. In the end, to take it over.
See why they got rid of it.
There was a lot of mission creep across the board, taking on things over time, more and more and more things to get to where we're at now.
Fair enough.
Unfortunately, John's not here for another question, so that.
Oh, really have one more.
Can I just make one more thing, cause like, I've talked to the chairman about it and other Board of Finance members about it. And Rachel and Greg and Lou is, I view this as. Park and Rec Commission coming in front of the Board of Finance for the first of 3 or 4 times this year. Because I think it's the communication change of what's going on.
I'd say this is Park and Rec 2.0.
Alright, well, Park and Rec 2.0 is first of however many visits this year, and that isn't just. Alright, we'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah.
To talk budget again, I think it's an ongoing conversation that's gonna happen.
But I'm not running camp, just so everybody's clear.
Oh, yeah, no, not volunteer.
Cynthia's gonna run a music camp and she's gonna
Yes.
volunteer.
I already have my tambourines and toenails.
Again, thank you, and we're listening and we're gonna stay tuned. So, all right, so we
Thank
do
you for
appreciate
your
everybody.
time.
Appreciate everybody coming out.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Liz.
Are you guys hot? You want to the air on?
It's too noisy. I'm already hearing. I don't have hearing aids like my brother.
Horse has already left the barn.
He's leaving the room now.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Thermostat is.
Yeah.
All right. again, so I think that was good conversation and we're
Yeah.
obviously gonna continue to work with this, so.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll give it some time to get some data. Definitely. All right, again, the next thing on the agenda, I believe, is the comptroller report, right? Brad?
This is what
Yes.
Brad shines.
All right, so the first thing we have here is the June 30th updated. So. Here's where we're at right now. So the revenue number didn't change, we're still 1.5, it might have changed a little bit, but big numbers, we're still $1.5 million. Collected more than was budgeted. A good chunk of that came from the state that we weren't banking on. We talked about the 227,000 from Park and Rec that was over. We've talked about those things, but that number
From the
didn't.
state, I'm not sure.
It
So
was like
we
500.
budgeted 282,660, we got rough numbers, $1 million. So we got the 282,660 municipal grant and aid that we've gotten for the last 7 years. We got 300,000 or so in car tax revenue that we didn't budget for because our mill rate has been below the state minimum for car tax for a number of years, because it was always set at 32. And I believe the other piece was the municipal revenue sharing grant was another like 400,000 or so. That every year the state puts in the budget and says, oh, we're gonna give you this revenue sharing money, and then never did. So we never budgeted for it because
Right.
otherwise we would have had a big hole. And because the state's never had more money, lo and behold, in 23, we got it. So revenue wise, it was a great year. Next page, expense wise, and you gotta. The Board of Ed's gonna come in at their budget or slightly under. So those are just the numbers right now because we haven't done all the year-end adjustments. Like, one of the big adjustments is what was in accounts payable at the end of 2022. We don't empty those funds until Suzanne Rogers, who's the assistant director over there for finance, and I sit down and we move between their grants. Because they have two bigger grant accounts that state money comes in. And they do journal entries throughout the year to move money around. We just book their actuals that they send us, and at the end of the year, we tie out to their books. They haven't told me that there's a problem over there, and I would have heard already, so they're gonna come in. At their number slightly below, because that's what they do, we just haven't made those adjustments yet.
Okay.
So the number that we're looking at really for the town side. Right now, I did book the 650,000 in full, the capital non-recurring. With that being booked. Our budget came under by just under $44,000. There's still a couple pieces I'm waiting on. But most things are booked at this point. One of the pieces I'm waiting on is we had a motor vehicle hit the bridge on Rockwell Road, not Rockwell Street.
Road.
In June or May. Would the town put out $15,000 to fix it? Plus another $5,000 in police outside work. That we're going after the company that owns the motor vehicle that hit that bridge. Our insurance company is going after their insurance company. I haven't booked that entry yet. At some point, if I feel confident we're gonna get the $20,000 that we're out, I will book that. And our number will go from 44 to 64.
Yep.
I don't wanna book that at this point and then find out that,
Right,
we're in a it's a legal battle and we're not gonna get the money for multiple years.
wow.
So, and I've booked out some of the accounts payable of bills that we haven't gotten yet. Legal bills for one of our vendors is behind, so we guesstimate what. We make an educated decision of what we think those missing bills are. I booked that journal entry has been booked. So if we do book that insurance money, we are with making the full capital non-recurring right now, unaudited. We are $50,000 to $60,000 to the good. So,
That's excellent.
Okay.
We didn't think that was gonna be a couple months ago.
no,
Yeah.
if I had more hair to lose, I would have lost a lot of hair. in July and August.
But his area is great now.
Yeah, well,
I'm off camera, nobody knows.
I'll give us a peek at your head.
Any questions on June before we look at August?
Nope.
Alright. So revenue wise, the big thing. We talked about a couple times already, is the state sent us the motor vehicle. Tax money again this year for the tune of like $500,000 that we didn't budget for. So. Great news that we got it.
Great.
It probably will be the last year we get it because the reval set our mill rate below it. So, but I didn't want to bank on it because in theory, we didn't necessarily eligible for it. Otherwise, everything else, like if you look at revenue wise, the other thing I want to point out is interest. So 2 months in the year. We've collected $106,000 in interest of our budgeted $450,000. We are meeting with banks and interest rates right now, you're looking at 530 basis points or 515 basis points, which is 5%. So I anticipate that's gonna be a good spot for us too, especially with the Fed talking about another rate increase the last I heard.
Mhm.
And that now they pushed off. They're talking, the Fed decreasing the rate. Last I kind of heard from people that follow this stuff was. They were talking about maybe the end of this year. Now they're talking maybe the end of 24, probably 25. So that number's in a good spot too. You never know what's gonna happen, but if we're looking at trending. Town and road, we got half of already, so revenue's in a good spot. Paula's collection rate is at 36.21, last year at the same time was 38.07, it jumps around. Year over year.
Backwards.
Current year
We're
is
higher this year,
38.07. And she gives me. Like, she has a sheet that she gives me every month of what it's been for the last 5 years. And at the end of August, it's been 33, 35, 36, 37, 38. So I put those in wrong. They should be different. I knew that this year was lower and I apologize for that.
So it is 36.
36. Prior year was 37 too, the prior year before that was 36. And we've been ending up in the 99 to 100 range. I know from my conversations with Bob, it drives us both a little nuts that it's over 100, how do you collect more? But it's because of the prior year.
Getting money on the book.
Yeah, and penalties and interest and
I got it.
all that stuff. So that's the revenue piece. Expenses, Dan Sevi and I, sorry, went through that earlier this week, where we're at. Park and Rec is our biggest concern right now with where they're at. Obviously, we spent the last hour talking about Park and Rec and what their 24 budget and actual numbers are gonna look at. We are digging into that as obviously we're aware of. Everything else is looking like it's in a good spot. We're supposed to be 16.6 or 16.7% spent right now. And most things are added or below, and the things that are above it is clothing allowance in each department, because we pay it once a year. Insurance, they always, for health insurance. In September, we'll pay for October. You know, they always want the money in advance.
1 month.
And our workers' comp and liability and property is billed quarterly. You know, so some of that stuff skews it. You'll see if you went through all the detail, like the assessor's office, their contracted services is fully spent right now. It's a vendor they pay in July. for the
Once a
whole
year, yeah.
You know, so that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at detail wise. And I think 2 hours we spent going through every line the other day. So, yeah, we're digging in every,
This is a small question, but what would make the senior center only have spent? I mean, have this much money proportionate to what they have?
Are you which year are you looking at?
Oh, sorry, August, August.
The current year? Alright, let me,
Let's carry on.
In fact, the year to date is 33,000, so you're looking at.
Yeah, that's all. That's-
Well, they're a little bit below, but there's a lot of their programs that actually happen during winter time.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just.
you get a lot of travel.
Wait,
people
thanks
away
for-
in the summer.
I hear you,
And their salaries, if you look at the salary line, is 14.9, which
right,
is a little below. But some of their salary line is part-timers,
yeah,
so
and I understand.
they use them more
There are
with,
other places,
program,
yeah, I
yeah.
understand. I get
so.
it, okay,
Great.
okay.
I like to know the answer to.
Someone want to make a motion?
To-
Except. the clerk.
I'd
I
like
make a
to,
motion that we accept the Bellflower's report as written.
I'll second that.
Any other questions, anything, Bob? you want to get? I think it was a lot of good information. We have a second, all in favor?
Just as a, for you,
Thank you, Dave.
motion to adjourn. I will probably not supply the big book for June anymore, but I will give updates as we go along. We're still tracking June 30th of where that's at. I don't know if you guys need the same detail for the 4th time, 5th time, but I will still keep that as part of my comptroller's report until that is audited and done.
Okay.
Page one's important.
Yeah. Page one's the revenue. The revenue is probably not gonna change. Page 2 is important.
Right,
And is there just a related point, have you had chats with Joe about when you'd like to have the audit report delivered?
So I've talked to him about it. And the story we got last year of why it was so delayed is we weren't squeaky enough. We
You
weren't
have
making
labor
enough
problems?
noise saying, come audit us, come audit us, come audit us. We're not gonna make that mistake again. The problem is we're being recorded on what, it's not usually our side that's the holdup.
If I remember, there were staffing problems, didn't he have staffing problems? And
Yes, but that's why the people that were making the most noise
Was getting the.
were getting done, and the people
That's
that were
usually the case,
understanding
yeah.
and. Yeah,
Because I just think we would find it very helpful to have that report
Yes.
before budget deliberation.
yes, I wish it was done today.
if you need any lessons in how to be squeaky,
Yeah.
I signed up for my seminar.
We'll give you, you know what, you know how you like to say, call your senators? But you know what? I still view the audit as like, it's like going to the doctor, like you want it done and over with, but you also don't wanna annoy your doctor before they start poking around. So there is a balance there.
That's a dentist for me.
Someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, right?
Second? All in favor?
Hi,
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank
bye
you.
guys.
Good night. Good night.